Tell me if you agree with the following proposition. We live in a bizarre world, an absurd world, right now, in 2018, in this place that we call reality, this existence on this thing that we call Earth. In this world today, it is a bizarre place. It is an absurd situation that we find ourselves in. Tell me if you agree with that proposition. I'm sure you do. You wouldn't be subscribed to this YouTube channel if you didn't think that something about this world was absurd. So on this particular matter, I'm willing to bet that we're all in agreement. Now, let me offer you another proposition. Most people are not particularly interested in or capable of having civil, constructive, thoughtful conversations about some of these more abstract or esoteric concepts. Would you agree with that? I think if I look back, as far as I can remember, I've had this interest in discussing things with people. I've liked to discuss some of the more philosophical questions of this life. And I've been lucky that I've found a few people who like to discuss these things as well. But over the course of my life, I think I've spent a lot of time around people where I hoped that we could have a constructive conversation. But before long, they had gotten triggered by one opinion of mine or another. Even when I was doing my best not to trigger them, most people, they're very easily offended by one opinion or another. So even when you find people who are interested in what we might call existentialism, this question of, well, what is the purpose of this life? Where do we find purpose in this life? Is there a purpose? Is there supposed to be one? Is there a benefit from trying to find one? Where would we go to find one? These kinds of questions. Even when I find people who are interested in that kind of conversation, usually what happens is the topic will turn to things like, well, good and bad. So if the question is, is the government good or bad? There are certain foundational beliefs that are going to affect a person's opinion on that particular topic. So for one topical example, if somebody still believes that there are evil boogeymen out there, such as Osama bin Laden or Putin, and these people who supposedly have access to nuclear bombs, then that person who believes that is probably going to have a very different philosophical opinion on so many other topics because of these foundational beliefs. So it's hard enough to find people who want to discuss and are willing to discuss and able to have forthright, frank conversations that can be beneficial to all parties. It's hard enough to find those people. But once you start going down the path of what I call deprogramming, which is getting rid of some of the nonsense beliefs in our minds that have been put there by TV and by school and these kinds of things, well, now you're cutting down the number of potential interlocutors, a number of potential people to have this conversation with. You're cutting down that number again, dramatically so. To the point where I would suggest that if you are someone who likes to have some of these more philosophical conversations, but you know that the TV is lying and that a lot of what we're told is nonsense, you are going to struggle to find people to have serious, in-depth conversations with. That is what I'm going to put to you. Now, if you have a different opinion to that, that's fantastic. I would love for you to leave a comment in the comment section below, pointing me in the right direction. Where can I go, for instance, to discuss this thing that we call life? Where can I go to discuss that with people who are already aware that Osama bin Laden is a fictional boogeyman? And where can I go to have a conversation with people who won't then try to get me to join their so-called movement? Oh, we know that the TV is lying, and we're going to stop that by bringing down NASA, or we're going to stop that by truth bombing the CNN, or we're going to stop that by having this movement online where we sit around in Google Hangouts and talk about how we want to bring down the system and all this kind of crap. Point me in the direction of people or some website or some place where I can go just to discuss things and put my opinion out there, and know that even if people disagree with my opinion, they won't get upset and they won't get angry. Okay, it's a difference of opinion, it's no problem. No need to get triggered. Where can we find some common ground and have a nice discussion. Where can I go? So please, in the comment section below, do me a favor, tell me where I can go to have that conversation. Now, let me show you something. This is the Cavendish experiment, and you're all familiar with it, I'm sure. This Cavendish experiment, if you take the time to look into the official story of how we know how much Mars weighs, because you know the experts say, oh, Mars weighs 6, what is it? Let's have a look here. What do they say? 6.41 times 10 to the 23 kilograms is what they say. Now, if you take the time to look into the official story of how they arrived at that figure, you will come to find out that the official story is that a guy, a couple hundred years ago, had some heavy balls hanging from the roof of a shed or a big hall, and by using a telescope, he was able to determine how much those balls attracted each other. Then from that, he was able to infer what he called Big G. And then with Big G, what you're able to do is you are able to determine the mass of the Earth. And then with the mass of the Earth, you can determine by inference the mass of all of the lights in the sky. This is the official story. This is the scientific story of how we know how much Mars weighs. That's not my opinion. In fact, I'm more than happy to put a link in the info box below. This page is available to the public. Go and check it out for yourself. Now, a lot of you guys already know this. You know that the official story of how we know how much Mars weighs is thanks to these people with their heavy balls in a shed 200 years ago. Okay? And so you know that the world is absurd. Now, this brings me to the next point, which is this question of existentialism. And existentialism is concerned with, like I said, trying to find purpose or meaning in this world, how we go about that. You know, what kind of dread do some people feel when they realize that, hey, officially, I die? What happens when I die? This is all going to end at some point. This is the kind of question or the kind of conversation that I like to have from time to time. Not all the time. I think it's easy to get stuck in navel gazing and these kinds of things, but every now and then, I like to just chat with people and say, hey, what do you think's going on here? And why do you think that? And if you've got a consistent framework for addressing these questions, share it with me. I'd love to know. What book did you read, or what people did you listen to, or what did you experience when you realized X, Y, and Z? And fortunately for me, that's exactly what we're discussing in the call this weekend. And I look back and I think there were times in my life where I had almost nobody to discuss these things with at all. And by some hard work and some effort that I've put in, I've managed to find a whole bunch of people, dozens and dozens of people, where this is the kind of conversation that they like to have as well. And so we set ahead of time a whole bunch of topics that we'd be discussing on the member Skype calls. And this week, week number 32, the topic is existentialism and death. Now, what that means is that this weekend, I will be discussing with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. Who knows how many will turn up to this call? The numbers can vary. I'll be discussing these kinds of questions for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, however long the conversation goes. Sometimes we chat for 4 or 5 hours. And the people I'll be discussing it with will be people who know full well that Osama bin Laden is a fictional boogeyman, and they know full well the official story of science and how the mass of Mars was determined. So all of these foundational programs that are put in people's minds about how the world works, well, these people don't have those silly beliefs. So they understand that the world is a bit absurd, really. They understand that a lot of what we're told to believe is complete nonsense. And they like to discuss philosophical things, which leads me to some good news that you might be interested in. This is the AUD to USD graph for the year to date. So at the start of the year, an Australian dollar was worth about, well, let's have a look here, about 78 US cents. And it got up to 80 cents. Wow. But since then, oh boy, it's just come tumbling down. Oh dear, look at this. Oh boy, look at this, 73 cents. Jesus Christ, look at that. So the Australian dollar, and I don't know why, don't ask me why this has happened, I don't know. But for some reason, the Australian dollar has weakened significantly against the US dollar. Now here's why that's good news for you, because if you're someone who likes to discuss philosophical things with people who are not programmed lemmings, people who will not get offended if you don't happen to believe that 3,000 people died on 9/11. But they also won't get offended if you believe that some people did die. Of course, my opinion is that, based on the evidence I've seen, I don't believe anybody died or got hurt in the thing event that we call 9/11. However, if somebody says to me, well, I've seen some evidence and I think maybe a few people did die, I say that's cool. You know what we should do? We should discuss that in an upcoming member Skype call. Let's dedicate a topic to 9/11. Did anybody die or get hurt? And so we can just keep choosing the topics as they go, and discuss these things in a civil, polite fashion. So why is this good news for you? Well, what it means is that $20 Australian works out for an American person with American dollars. It works out to less than $15. So in other words, if you do the maths, do some quick maths, basically for what, $4 per week, you get to, if you want to, take part in these calls every Sunday. Or if you don't like to take part in the calls, you just like to listen, then you get to listen to the calls. And there is currently a collection now of 30 of these calls on all different kinds of topics. And as soon as you sign up to the website, you get instant access to all of them. So you might decide, well, I don't really want to be recorded discussing these things yet, but I'll listen to a few of the calls. And if I feel more confident in the future, maybe I'll take part in the calls in the future. And that's totally cool as well. So if you were to decide that it is time now to try and discuss these things or listen to people who won't get triggered by controversial opinions, and you understand that in life, a lot of the time you do get what you pay for. And if you hang out with freeloaders, or if you hang out with people who have a victim mentality or a scarcity mentality, then that is going to rub off on not just the conversation, but on you as well. So if you understand those things and you decide, you know what, since the Australian dollar has absolutely tanked, and since this topic does look pretty interesting, maybe it's time to go and check out this johnlebon.com. Well, if you were to do that, let's go and check out the membership section. All you would have to do is click select, and within a minute, PayPal will take care of it. So PayPal takes care of the whole thing, and as soon as you have signed up through PayPal, you get instant access to the entire collection of johnlebon.com material. Now, there are a lot of people who are subscribed to this YouTube channel, and their philosophy is, I will never, ever, in a million years, pay to listen to or take part in that kind of conversation. Never in a million years will I hand over money for that. And that's totally cool. We all have to make decisions about how we want to spend our money, what we think our money is worth spending on. But I can tell you that as far back as I can remember, I would have been more than happy to pay a few dollars a week if it meant that I got to have these kinds of conversations with people who cared enough to be there in the first place. And it would have saved me so much time talking with normies and lemmings and people who, even if they're well-meaning or they're nice enough people, they were never going to be able to partake in a constructive conversation because they just weren't ready. And I would argue that in most cases, they were never ever going to be ready. I could have saved myself so much time had there been this kind of platform available for me 10, 15 years ago, because that's how long I've been interested in this stuff. And thankfully, I can sit here now in, August 2018, and I know that on Sunday, I get to have this conversation. On Sunday, I get to discuss these topics with people who care about the conversation, and I'm looking forward to it. So that'll do us for today on the 14th of August 2018. John LeBon signing off, and until next time, you guys take care of yourselves, and do just have a think about this. Just think about, is this the kind of conversation that you'd like to have? And are these the kind of people you'd like to have the conversation with? Because if you would, you're literally minutes and a couple of clicks away